If you will find your way back into the auditorium or into your assigned seat or into a seat, I would appreciate it. That will look so terrible for you. Yeah,
That's
Yeah.
what the screen looked like every Sunday.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. Because I was talking to Rick. We were waiting on you, so it didn't matter. No.
My husband, I thought he already gave up.
When that happened. While everybody comes in here, I got to tell you a quick story. Jennifer made me think of it. Tammy and I were doing one of our very first marriage seminars. I don't remember exactly where it was, but after the first breakout, Tammy didn't come back into the room. And I was thinking, I don't think it's a good thing if the marriage seminar host and hostess separate during the seminar, okay? So we waited, everybody came back in, no Tammy. I went on, did my presentation. I got to be honest, I was a little distracted. No Tammy, no Tammy. I'm looking, going, do I have the car keys? Because I need a ride home. If not, finally Tammy comes roaming in at the break, and it turned out that one of the ladies who were in attendance had pulled her aside and said, I got some problems. I said, please tell me, because I want to know that we're going to make it before I encourage everyone else to make it. So we will have another breakout here in a little bit before lunchtime, and yes, lunchtime is going to happen. In fact, it's the only reason I'm here, because I already knew what I was going to say. I could have stayed in bed, but I heard there was free lunch. So have you ever noticed that, especially with dog owners, that sometimes dog owners look like their master? Right, just raise your hand if you're a dog owner. Yeah, okay. Just out of curiosity, any cat owners here? Okay, good. Well, tomorrow at church will be an invitation, your opportunity to come forward and repent of that. But I'm a dog person. But there actually is scientific evidence that dogs look like their owners. And if you don't think that's the case at your house, you're probably wrong, okay? But it is not by accident that it happens that way. There is a psychological principle. It is called the mere exposure effect. And simply put, it means we like things that are familiar to us. In other words, that terribly ugly dog we picked up at the pound was not because Sarah McLachlan was singing In the Arms of the Angel, but there was something, I don't know what it is about that little ugly mutt that I love. It looks like you. That's the reason why. Part of our brain that does that's the same part, maybe you've had this experience, that you saw a new car on the lot and said, I've never seen that model in that color. I want it. You buy it, you drive off the lot, and 3 pass in front of you, right? We notice those things that are familiar to it. But if you want to really see this, go with an elderly couple out to eat. Because they like the restaurant that they like. And they want to sit in what they refer to as their seats. And when things at the restaurant aren't the way that it is supposed to be, they are quick to inform you of that. I'd like to see the manager, please. We used to get the cottage cheese on top of the peaches, and now it's alongside of it. Please fix that, okay? Tami's mom, I love Tami's mom, and she said I'm not supposed to tell this because they listen online sometime, but I'm going to do it anyway. Let me just tell you right now, I love Tami's mom. Thing I love most about her is she gave me Tami. But that's just no, when she comes, because she has the way she likes her coffee. She orders her coffee, but she orders a half a cup and then more water because it's too strong, and it's pretty deliberate. I often will look up to the server and go, you want to be writing this down, okay? Don't do any of that. Can I get you coffee? No, you're going to need maybe another pad, okay? So anyway, but that's part of this mere exposure effect, and what happens is that over time, that a married couple, they begin to act like one another. They begin to look like one another. They start liking, even though they think they're different, the same things. In fact, the reason it makes Tami mad is she's acting like me. But I'm convinced, we're convinced, that that's actually the way it was supposed to be. Let's see if we can get a little more scientific for you. The peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Now, any of you who follow me on Facebook or know much about me know that I like restaurants. I like trying different foods, and I love taking a picture so that everybody can see what I ate today that they didn't. I like that kind of stuff. And so with all of that, one would think that I've had a lot of culinary experiences. The truth is I have never, to this day, ever eaten a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I know, hard to believe. You're thinking, can we trust him with anything else? But I can't. It's partially because my mom always made them with grape jelly, and I don't like grape jelly. Now, I love a peanut butter and honey sandwich, and I make them a lot. But I've never had one. But I know enough about peanut butter and jelly sandwich to know the major components. First of all, 2 slices of white bread. If you make it out of wheat bread, you're just being pretentious, okay? So, you put on one side of the bread peanut butter, and then with a clean knife, you put the jelly on the other side, and then you slam those 2 things together, right? It is the principle of adhesion and cohesion. Adhesion are 2 things that are different, like the peanut butter and jelly sticking together. Cohesion is what makes the peanut butter sticky to itself and the jelly sticky to itself. And you smash those 2 together, and any 3-year-old will tell you what the next step is. What is it? You peel it apart. I don't know if it's quality control. I don't know if it's a careful examination of the 2 major components, but they peel it apart. And you know what happens when you peel apart a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? On the jelly side, there's now a little bit of peanut butter, right? And on the peanut butter side, there's a little bit of jelly. And that's what happens in marriage. There's peanut butter and there's jelly. And we stick together, but over time we decide maybe we should be pulled apart. For whatever reason it is, you're not enough jelly for me. Well, really, you're not enough peanut butter for me. Or maybe it is you're getting to be a little too much jelly, if you know what I mean, and you're getting to be a little too much peanut butter, and I just found out I'm allergic to tree nuts, okay? That's just the thing, the way that it goes. So we pull apart, and what happens? She gets a little of me when she goes, and I get a little of her when I go. And we take that off into another marriage potentially, and it doesn't quite work out. As I mentioned, statistically, that second marriage is less likely to succeed, and the third marriage, less likely. You know why? Because you keep taking a little bit of different jelly and a little bit of different peanut butter every place you go. So our friends and family said, no, don't pull apart. Just like a mama that tells that 3-year-old, quit playing with your food and eat it, right? What are you going to do? We're going to shove it together. You all know what you need to do. You need to recommit. You need to come together and you push those sandwiches together, right? And over time, that works for a while. Then, I don't know, it's not working. We peel apart. Guess what we find? You didn't fix anything. You just made more of a mess. All of a sudden, there is a little more jelly on this side, and a little more peanut butter on this side. And you know what you need to do? You all know to go to a marriage seminar. Because a marriage seminar, they really apply the pressure about marriage and commitment and faithfulness, and they will push that peanut butter and jelly. The problem is, you're still peanut butter and you're still jelly. You're just jammed closer together. And so for a lot of couples, they go through all this process. They go through classes, recommitments, seminars, retreats, counseling, all these things, all of which I think are valuable. But most people they don't come together. They just feel stuck together. And when they're stuck together, they feel stuck. And so we got to find something that is a little bit different. In just a moment, Tami will help me illustrate this. We're going to have the first time ever for this, and so buckle up, because we never know how it's going to turn out. But let me just tell you about what God and his plan is for marriage. God creates Adam. He says it's not good that man should be alone. He creates Eve, and he forms a union that we refer to as marriage. The intention, one man, one woman, together for life. The text tells us that Adam and Eve came together, and it said they are joined as one flesh. And so that is the instruction, that is the mandate, that is the model for what a marriage is going to be. And we're great at the joining part. We do really good at the joining part. In fact, we got lots of ways by which we're joined together. Tami and I, we were joined, first of all, by agreement. I asked her to marry me. She agreed. We came to the wedding. We gave our vows, and we were joined because we agreed to be joined. In fact, state of Colorado, at least it was, that for a while, if you and an individual bought a piece of property with the intention of living as a man and a woman, even if you weren't married, that signature on the contract for that house served like a marriage license. You were what was called common law married. In other words, if you were to marry someone else or marry someone, you would actually have to file for divorce from the person you bought the house with. Now, that may have changed now because, believe it or not, there's nothing illegal in Colorado except going to church. But we still love it. It's a mile high and getting higher all the time. But with that being said, we join, right? We come together by agreement. Then we come together by ceremony, right? We come together by ceremony. We got a big ceremony. We're going to stand up in front, as the preacher says, God and these witnesses, and we are going to commit ourselves. We're going to make a verbal joining. In fact, there's even been discussion on people's parts that said we didn't have a big ceremony, but you know what we did? We went up in the woods somewhere, and we made our commitment, right? We joined some kind of a ceremony. We were joined, Tami and I, by law. Not exactly joined by law, but we went down to the courthouse in Oklahoma, and I remember it fondly because after we paid our fee, after we paid our fee, they issued us a marriage license, and then I threw up down the marble floors of the city hall because I was just glad to have that all over with. But if we were to dissolve this marriage relationship, that would be a legal process that we had to go through to fulfill certain requirements. And so I said we were joined by law. We're joined by children. Tami and I are convinced that in our difficult years in our marriage, the reason that we didn't divorce was each of us had the fear that we might get custody. And so what happens? I mean, you've heard this, right? Oh, we've had struggles for years, but we're going to stay together until the kids are out of the house, right? That's a couple that now has been stuck together by children. We're stuck together in sexual intimacy. In fact, some even perceive that the idea of one flesh is about that sexual encounter, that sexual part of the marriage relationship, and certainly it is part of it, but it's just another way that we're joined. So what happens is, if that struggles in a marriage, or for that matter even fails in a marriage, a couple that's been stuck together only by that, what transpires? It comes apart, right? Because that's the only thing that was holding it together. And so joining is only half of the formula. Because it says the two shall be joined and shall become one flesh. Clearly, joining and one flesh are akin, they are connected, but they are something different. Let's look at that little joiner there, that idea of becoming. The idea of becoming is from moving from one state to another state. It's moving from a less desirable state to a more desirable state. And I do not mean our recent move from Oklahoma to Texas. But it is from a lesser condition typically to a better condition. It means that there is a process, an ongoing process. So there is joining and there is becoming. And the becoming points to something that is to be attained, but something to also aspire to. It is a place to go towards, to become that. So it seems to me that it is that as we are joined together, that only is the beginning of the process. And that for couples who remain only joined, they risk being also able to pull apart. And when they pull apart, it leaves more than peanut butter and jelly. It leaves all sorts of damage. So we need to know more about this one flesh. This idea of oneness is really special in Scripture. This same word, which can be translated mingled or mixed, the two shall become mingled. It's the exact same word that God uses to describe himself in what the Jewish people often refer to as the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. And if any of you have made any consideration of God, you know that it's perplexing. A singularity that is a plurality that is a singularity. In other words, it is the most difficult to understand oneness, but it is truly divine. And so God calls the husband and wife to become one in their relationship. Now, for some, the idea is that marriage is a contract. That is to say that, and I used to sign and write a lot of contracts when I was in construction management, and here's the way that it worked. There was a particular contractor that said, we need this particular service in my field. We need this heating and air conditioning. Here are the plans. Here are the specifications. Here's the timeline. And we would make a bid on that. And basically what we said is we would be willing to provide that requested, that needed, that specified service for a particular cost. And within that, not only that there would be some agreement in the contract about how we are to be paid. Frequently we used what was called full performance draw, cash on completion. That just simply meant we would be paid along as we do the process, and that when we had major equipment, you would pay for that. When it was delivered, when it was installed, you'd pay for the installation. And at the end, minus a small, what they called a retention, we would be paid in a full amount, and then eventually that percentage at the very end, it was just kind of make sure that all the nuts and bolts were where all the nuts and bolts needed to be. So we entered into that agreement. We entered into that contract. And for that contract, I would sign on the line. And in fact, you look at my signature, I print really well, but my signature is hardly readable. And the reason why is I wasn't sure. I always wanted to know somebody who signed that contract. But anyway, I signed that. The general contractor would sign it, and that was our agreement. Now, If, in fact, the contractor quit paying me, guess what we did? We quit working. He or they did not fulfill their end of the contract, and therefore I was not obligated to continue mine. Or if my company failed to perform within the time frame or to the specifications, guess what they quit doing? They quit paying. I did not fulfill my side of the contract, therefore they were no longer obligated. So we go into a marriage relationship, and Tami says, promise to love, honor, and cherish. I said, me too, let's sign. And we sign on that. Then down the road, I go, you know what? I don't think she's loving, honor, and cherishing the way I think she should love, honor, and cherish. Guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to quit loving, honor, and cherishing. And when she finally shapes up, or vice versa, she goes, when he finally shapes up, when they start doing their part, then I'll start doing my part. And since they're not doing their part, then I want out of here. The contract is over. The problem is, marriage isn't a contract. Bill, where'd you go, Bill? Oh, you're right down front. Bill and I were talking about the contract thing, right? It's not a contract. It's a covenant. Let me tell you how covenant works. Specifically in regards to the covenant of marriage, and this is most often misunderstood. Tami and I believe that when we filled out that so-called marriage license, and at that time it was required that the minister, the officiate, sign on it, and 2 witnesses. In Oklahoma, that's how it was. But that we came into an arrangement with one another, when in fact, marriage is not that kind of covenant. Marriage is that God slides a covenant in front of us. And he said, you, husband, are obligated this way, and wife, you are obligated this way, and you're obligated to me, not to each other. Those are the conditions of God's covenant. He says, you are obligated to do this, to be in this kind of a relationship. Now, since he is in a relationship with me, and you're in a relationship with me, that's what puts you in the relationship with one another. So I have a young lady come into my office. She goes, my husband's been looking at the pornography, and Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount says if your husband watches pornography on the internet, that's committing adultery, and if you commit adultery, you can get another husband. Isn't that right? And I said, well, I'm a little clarification. Abraham Lincoln addressed the internet, not God. But in that regards, I said there's a little bit more to it. But here's what I asked her, and I meant it with all the sensitivity, and lest there be any misunderstanding, no place for pornography in an individual's life, in a couple's life, in anybody's lives. It's nothing but devastating. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I asked her, I said, so what you're asking is how can you get out of the covenant that you made to God? The agreement that you made. In other words, you agreed to love, honor, and cherish sickness and health. You made that promise to God, not in front of God, to God. And if you want out of that, it's going to have to be within the conditions of his covenant, not in your agreement. That's serious and that's sobering, right? Because all of a sudden, if I've got a real problem with her, she's got a real problem with me, our resolution to that relationship is not simply us resolving our contractual responsibilities, or for that matter, faulting the other for why we are the way that we are. It means that in spite of how she acts, in spite of how I act, that we are responsible to behave the way that we have made a commitment and a promise to. Could I please have my beautiful spokesmodel come up here? You all know Vanna, Tami. Let's illustrate it this way. We have a couple. I picked orange and green because guess what? Pink and blue are out of fashion now because it's too gender specific, and it's even confusing because a 1910 Ladies Home Journal article said actually men are pink, bright and vibrant, and women are blue, soft and blue. We're back to where we were at the turn of the previous century, so we don't know which is which. But right now, we're going to just go with green and orange. You can be green and orange if you want. I like orange because, well, I'm wearing orange shoes today. So anyway, husband and wife joined together. Yeah, Okay, it's a little humid here in Beaumont, but I suppose if Tami were to pull those apart, you'd probably get pretty close. They only been married a couple months. Pull them apart, you get any green? Get any green and orange on them? Okay, push those two together. Those two, we don't want you to come apart, so we're going to push them a little together. They start getting flat like a pancake. All of a sudden, I should have given everybody something, then you'd be having something to play with. You would have to listen. But all of a sudden, struggles. I don't like what she does. I don't like how he treats me. All of a sudden, the time for the two to be peeled apart. Let's just see, it's like a little exercise here. She's doing good. Oh, yeah. Not too bad. You should be a divorce attorney. You got it separated there. But you'll notice a little bit of orange, a little bit of green. Couples, oh, yeah, you know what? This isn't oneness. We got to have them come together again. Push them a little farther together. That marriage seminar, oh, she knew what she was talking about. Bless her heart. She survived him. If they can do it, anybody can. That was a great seminar. All of a sudden now, but down the road, kids move out. Problems still remain, still struggling with all that. Even Tami and those beautiful nails, which will have green and orange under them for the rest of the week. But she's trying to peel it apart. Doing better, aren't you? Yeah, pretty good. Your sweaty hands did. Oh, but yeah, a little bit of green, a little bit. But all we've gone through is joined. But here's what mingled is. All of a sudden, the two begin to be mixed together. We find that, for example, like black and white paint mixed together doesn't give you gray paint. If you look at it at a microscopic level, it remains black and white. It's just it is now so mingled, it is hard to tell where one thing ends and another begins. So all of a sudden they go, friends say, I couldn't help but notice, Tami, something about you's changing. I think you're letting him boss you around, and all of a sudden you're not that vibrant orange you used to be. Or, you know what? I think she's got you wrapped around her little finger. You don't have that distinctiveness that you once have. In fact, all of a sudden I'm starting to look at it, and you guys as a couple no longer look like those wonderful people that you were. You're kind of a muddled mess. You see the muddled mess? That's the muddled mess of a mingled couple. A couple that has had an external force acting upon them. When God is a present and active part of our marriages, he, as I submit to him, he, as she submits to him, are being shaped and molded to be, well, kind of moldy, I guess, right? Whereas the world says, you know what, you don't have your individuality. You don't have your distinctiveness. You two are just, you're together, but you're not who you once were. You're not very attractive. I'll just tell you, you pitch a young couple and say, don't you want to be married? You could be this someday. That doesn't sound so good. Except for the fact that the word becoming does not only mean to move from one condition to a better condition, it has a secondary meaning. Antiquated a little bit, but I would suppose that many of you women have heard this expression. That outfit or that dress looks very becoming on you. It means that it fits, it suits, it's attractive because it's the way it's supposed to be. When we, as a couple, are becoming one flesh, we are becoming to the one who made us. We are fulfilling our marriage purpose. Our primary marriage purpose, simply put, is to bring glory to God. Rabbits are proof that marriage is not necessary to reproduce the species. Right? I'm sure that you have friends and companions that you are extremely close to, and it did not require you to be married to them. But our marriage is a fulfillment of God's purpose and plan to end the lives of two individuals to bring glory to him, and therefore this idea of covenant is our agreement that in the good times to bring glory to him, and when things are really tough and we want out, to say that he is given greater glory by us sticking in it and sticking with it and figuring it out that he might be glorified by two people that are growing closer to him every day. I'll see if I can do this with this microphone, but I want you to imagine for just a moment that you have a couple, him and her, and the two are at odds with one another. She is stiff-necked and he is hard-headed, and they are not about to compromise with one another. And when we bring them into a counseling situation, for example, we're going to try to get rid of all of those obstacles that stand between him and her. But here's what we find. It's not the primary problem. It's not about the hours worked. It's not about the hours of intimacy that are missing. It's not about the kids. It's not about the finances. It's not about the in-laws. It's not about the personalities. Tami and I have discovered, not only in our study, but in our own married life, that the more distant we were from this relationship, the one with God, the more obstacles there were in our personal relationship. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't obstacles. For example, a health issue may come along and it presents some real challenges to our marriage. But you know what? I know some people that have some unbelievable health issues, and their marriage could not be stronger. So what's the difference? We're convinced that it's how far away we are from the one whom we are seeking to please. If I think that it's all about me, I'm mistaken. If she says it's all about she's mistaken. When all of it is about he, it changes our perspective on our marriage relationship. And so again, without ruining the microphone and the recording, but here's the thing. He's over here, she's over here. I can't get them to compromise with one another, but here's what I can get them to do. I said, will you work on your relationship with God first? So she humbles herself to God. He humbles himself to God. She humbles herself to God. He humbles himself to God. Still having obstacles with one another. But what's happening over time as they move closer to what God wants them to be? They're moving closer to each other. Now, easier to say than to do because it takes work and all of that. But sometimes it's, I need her to come over here, and she says, I need you to come over here if we're going to get this worked out, when both of us aren't where we're supposed to be in relationship to this. For us, that perspective changed our relationship. Listen, I understand that God has a condition for divorce within his covenant. I recognize the potential need for separation in cases of verbal abuse or physical abuse or something else, that there may need to be some separation. But ultimately, that covenant is what is the thing that we agreed to. And when we understand that and our responsibility, it's better for us. It's better for our children who see what it means to be those who live to glorify God in all aspects of their life, which includes marriages. It's good for our neighbors who say they have had one catastrophe after another, and they continue to work through those things, and as a married couple, they are the epitome of a married couple. Why is that? Giving us evangelistic opportunities. And if we are to understand what it means to be the church as a whole, marriage is part of that understanding, as God uses that very illustration. All those things become more clear when we begin to see clearly what our marriages really are. My prayer is that you are joined, and you are joined firmly. But more so, we pray that you become and constantly are becoming that one flesh, that you might be most becoming to God. Could I ask you to just give a round of applause for our beautiful spokesmodel? She did so good with the Play-Doh today. Just so you know how marriage works, I said, hey, I'm not going to be able to shape the Play-Doh like I normally do. And she goes, would you like me to come over there and be the microphone stand? And I said, that's going to be demeaning. That is not going to serve our purposes. I think she did a great job. I'm going to have her do all the mingling in the future. Okay, with that being said, we're going to take a brief break. I show here about 14 minutes. We will at a quarter till, or 10 minutes sounds good to me. You know what? I give you a dough and you take them. No. Yeah, about 10 minutes. Do you want to continue in there? Okay, ladies, back in there at the table in about 10 minutes. Guys in here, going to have our final session of the morning, and then we will stop for lunch. Again, thanks for paying attention. I appreciate it.